a large organization with 2,000 stores and 200,000 items, no one can remember that. With 100,000 customers walking in every day, no one can remember each one of you. But I still want that personalized experience. For that, I will have to use the data to make sure that I tell you what you want at what time and you offered the right offer. And that is important.
Hello, everyone. We have the pleasure of welcoming Shailendra to our Engati Engage interview series. I am Shripati Bhatt from the Engati team. Let's start with a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, which is available across 14 channels with 25,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, TechWorld, the CIO, and many such. We run the Engati blog, video channels, and the Engati Engage podcast, which receives upwards of 300,000 viewers annually. And now for our guest. Shailendra or Shelly is the Vice President and Chief Evangelist of SAP and Advisory Board member of Aegis School of Business, Data Science, Cybersecurity, and Telecommunication. He's a keynote speaker across Asia and Oceania around emerging technologies, which are also showcased through the Shelly Show. Having over a quarter of a century of experience in the field of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, advanced analytics, and data science, Shailendra has built upon an extensive knowledge of data driven analytics, strategies for revenue growth, cost reduction, marketing, and customer behavior management to drive business outcomes. Welcome, Shailendra. It's really great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? How are you doing?
Very well, very well. Are you staying indoors, staying safe?
Staying safe, absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's begin. But before we begin the interview, for all the viewers, we have something special for you. So stick around towards to the end of this interview. Shailin, the first question that I wanted to talk to you about is about the industry 4.0, which I've seen in some of your recent Shelly shows, right? How prepared do you think we are for Industry 4.0, which is powered by digital technologies?
So there are different components of Industry 4.0, and that include data, machine learning, networking, which is 5G, or then you've got which drives IoT. You've got analytics. You've got blockchain. So there are a few different building blocks of Industry 4.0. Now, different countries in different parts of the world are at different levels of maturity, at the moment. But what I've seen is that there are some countries which are fairly advanced, which are driving it quite quickly and quite well, whereas some countries are just lagging behind and just getting there. From India perspective, what I know, and I'm an Indian, so living in Australia, so I've got some passion for it, and I do travel to India quite a lot. I've seen that though we are doing a lot of work for other countries, we have not yet implemented that in our own country itself. So the improvement and the changes that we expect out of India, because we've done all that good work, is not being implemented in India, but it is being delivered to other countries as I see.
In terms of preparedness, what do you think India could do, Indian companies and Indian sectors could do better to gear ourselves more towards Industry 4.0?
See, the fundamental requirement for Industry 4.0 is the infrastructure, which is your network availability, so that the IoT data is transferred. You're able to use social media data, so you can create that data as well, and so these are bringing in all of these together. But if there is no infrastructure, or there is poor infrastructure, then it becomes quite difficult. For example, if you travel from one part of Delhi to the other part of Delhi, the chances are that you will have a call drop at least 10 or 12 times. Even if you want to send out a message, sometimes it will go off, sometimes it will not. Now, that is the basic infrastructure need that India has to actually start doing anything. If you don't have the pipe, how will you get the water through it, right? Otherwise, it's like, oh yeah, we can talk about it, we'll be very happy about it, but the chances are that we will not be able to deliver. And data is the key to everything. And if the flow of data in this Industry 4.0 is not done properly, then there is a huge challenge and a problem that countries will face. So if you look at countries which are growing really quickly, for example, South Korea or Australia or other countries which are developed, but they're also getting towards Industry 4.0. Those countries have actually invested a lot in the infrastructure. There is 5G network available almost in 20% of Sydney, where I live. So I don't have to go. But 4G was powerful enough. I could get on 4G around about 35, 40 Mbps on my mobile phone. And now that with 5G coming in, at points I'll get 200 Mbps to 500 Mbps, which means that there is no network lagging or there is no discontinuation while I'm having a conversation, while I'm going through. I used to joke on this that, there will, because of the infrastructure issues in India, when we were kids, people used to say, we went overseas and, we saw this and we saw that. Now, in the next coming few years, people will go overseas and say, you know what? I went overseas to England and I saw cars running by themselves. Yeah, they're self-driving cars. Well, you can't have them in India because there is no network. There will be network issues. So a self-driving car will be driving and suddenly there is a network outage. The car will go berserk and start killing people. So you can't have that unless you have the network. And that's the fundamental of your Industry 4.0.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for your views on that. So the next question that I had is about chatbots. That's the domain that we work in. But in general, what I wanted to hear your ideas on how are chatbots adopting to technologies like AI, ML, data science, and especially deep learning that are the booming technologies that everybody in the industry right now wants to be in, right?
So there is a lot of talk, and so there is a talk and there is a delivery option. The component. There are two different components, and they are very different if you look at it. Chatbots have been talked about a lot in the last 2 years or so, and I think almost everyone has created a chatbot. But they're not smart chatbots. You ask a question to a chatbot, and you would know that it's a chatbot because it is a chatbot, and you see a message and it says, "Hi, my name is David. How can I help?" And it looks like to the person that it is an individual there, and then you ask them two questions, and they will say, "Go to that part of my website, and you will have an answer." So basically, these are those chatbots which are dumb chatbots, which are basically rule driven, that if a question is like that, then answer that and so forth, which I think is nothing. It's what they've done is they've trained or they've written 10 or 12 different questions, 10 different kind of questions, and picking up one or the two mixes out of those, they're diverting or taking you to the next. So it's a simple if then else kind of a statement running at the back. Then comes the smart ones. Now, smart ones are really smart chatbots where there is machine learning happening. They're trying to understand the language. They're trying to understand the emotion. And I'll tell you a very classic example. Around about 8 years ago, one of my clients asked me, we run this project, and people, now this is human. Human makes a phone call and talks to the customer, and the customer is not happy. At the end, we ask the customer to do a survey. And we ask him only one question, which is, were you happy? Were you satisfied with the service?
The feedback, kind of.
The feedback, right? So the customer can turn around, can say, good or bad, but sometimes sarcastically they can say, yeah, very good. That yeah, very good, is that good or not? But if you take that word as it is, you would give that, oh yeah, that guy did a very good job, the call was brilliant. But actually no, because he didn't do the job properly and the client was so upset, or the customer was so upset that he said, yeah, very good. So it wasn't good at all. Now these are the emotions that you need to understand. Now that's where intelligent chatbots are actually even understanding the language and reading between the lines to say whether the client is or the customer is happy or not. Now, that's emotional intelligence that is coming through. Apart from that, the content that you write on the chatbot or the questions that you write to the chatbot is not only doing anything else or taking the questions that it had, it's actually understanding the meaning of the question and then diverting. It's like a human talking to a human. And that is the very important aspect of natural language processing that's happening in today's day and age. And if that is not done properly, the chances are that tomorrow we will turn that to voice, and that will also be as dumb as a chatbot, a textual chatbot.
Absolutely.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does absolutely make sense. The other component that comes in a text conversation is you need to have a context of a conversation as it goes along and drive meaning out of the context. The sarcasm that you talked of in feedback is a very good example of AI ML applications. Really, do you think you can help? We could talk about a little bit more about workplaces or business that adopt AI and automation technologies. We talked about chatbot and how and examples of such in chatbot. Can you share some more examples of companies that you think use AI or automation technologies in unique ways that you would have come across?
Yeah, there are many, and I've been doing that for such a long time that even at SAP, the largest thing for us is to actually automate and make sure that the processes are intelligent enough by themselves. We don't want we want the end-to-end process to be intelligent, and there is machine learning at each component of it, which is trying to understand how the process is running, whether it is going to fail or so forth, and automate it as much as possible. There's a classic example of resume, and everyone will reckon with that. So when you apply for a job, everyone applies for a job once in a while, right? So when you apply for a job to a recruiter, what does he do?
He would go through your resume and see whether you fit the job profile or the job description or not.
Mate, I doubt. They never do that. What they do is, very interestingly, I found out because I spent a good time with one of the recruiters, a good friend of mine, said, well, it's very simple. We look at the key words in the job profile and look at the keyword, and then look at the keywords in the CV. It's control F, and if the number of keywords there matching the job description, that is an interview. That's where you send a person to an interview. And I said, but that doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean that that you're taking that CV, understanding the person, and making sure that the job profile matches. He says, no, we don't do that. We will just look at how many times that keyword appears here. So that means that, okay. So there is a very good machine learning process that has been built by SAP as well, where it actually picks up the job description, understands it, and when a CV comes, it understands that as well, and then tries to match to say what will be the fit between the job description and the CV.
That's nice.
No human is doing anything. It is like, because the job description says that you got to manage a number of people. So do you have people skills? Well, you don't know. So you need to then understand what you've written, and does that actually explain or showcase whether you've got people skills or not?
Right.
And if it doesn't show that, even if you say that I've managed 10 people, it won't pick you up because it doesn't come out from your profile. Your profile is not that strong that it would allow you to manage people. And that is where machine learning is playing a very important role. What it is doing is it is taking up the job profile, understanding the job profile, learning from the job profile, breaking each and every words and phrases to understand what the hiring manager needs, then takes as many CVs that are coming in, understands what the CVs are doing, and then tries to match the best profile so that when the interview stage comes in, it's not a big problem. Another example of that, which is both NLP and machine learning, is a very simple case. You know what happens when you've got a company working in 10 different parts of the world, or in 100 countries. Every country has their own language and their own way of speaking, and the legalities in every country is different, right?
Right.
One thing that is legal in one country may be illegal in the other country.
Absolutely.
So when you write contracts with that company, with that country, so if you're working in India and I come to you and sign a contract with you,
Okay.
it's fine, we sign a contract. Suddenly, after 5 months or 6 months or whatever, the government of India makes a changes to the to their laws, right? And those laws are written in Hindi, for instance. Now, what legal people do is they read the law in Hindi, translate it into English, make sure that the translation works so that it can be incorporated in the contract. Otherwise, they will become illegally presenting. We've made it very simple. It's a very simple thing. The moment someone publishes a new legal document onto their website, our software picks it up, takes that, translates it, understands it, makes sure that we comply to that contract, that new legal changes, or makes changes to the contract and gets it over with. Now, human interaction is almost zero. There are three things that have taken away. One, no one has to sit down and wait for that document to come in. No one has to translate it. And finally, no one has to edit the legal document, which is a binding contract between two organizations. All of that is now automated, and then it then poses in front of the decision maker to say, are you happy with that? Yes or no? And at every point there is a checkpoint to see that you're not doing something really dramatic. But if you get the gist of it, you're able to make legal changes now utilizing machine learning and NLP.
Those are awesome use cases that you just talked about. Things like that really take most of the error parts that happen either during translations or during manually reading or interpreting sentences, right? But Shailendra, if you imagine the use case that you just talked about has so much amount of data now, some system has to keep constantly monitoring whether the terms and conditions have changed. When they've changed, it has to download that whole content and kind of translate that whole I don't know 100 pages worth of contract which people generally don't read. And if you look at it, the amount of data, not just with these use cases, but also with all the pandemic going around right now, most of the companies are trying to go digital, trying to get move more towards industry 4.0, have a lot of their data being uh, digitally processed. Such vast amount of data, how do you think organizations will or can utilize and leverage these vast amount of data right now? How do you think industries can leverage or use these vast amount of information that's there?
Well, we're creating more and more data now because everyone is working from home. Well, we all know for the minute, which means that the need for a good data transfer, data flow is there, and everything is now documented. Whether I'm working or not, whether I'm in a meeting, what did I say is being recorded, right? So I have to be careful. That's a different story. But having said that, all of that has been taken. A lot of organizations are getting so intelligent that they're creating learnings from all of these things. So, for example, I'm talking to you, and this is a Zoom meeting, right? You would be able to take what I'm saying and educate other people. On a normal day, now imagine this is, yeah, we planned for this, but imagine it was a normal meeting between two individuals of the same company. Then the record of that would be kept, which could be used to train others going forward. So if someone makes a mistake or there is an error and you don't want others to actually repeat that error, then you can actually show them that this is what was wrong, what happened, wrongly said, please don't do that. So there is a lot of learning that is coming out of what we're doing at the moment, and a lot of that that thing that has been recorded and kept on, which means that the amount of data that is being created now in the past, I think in the past 3 months, the amount of data created in the world would have been far, 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 far more than the amount of data created entire last year or a couple of years, because everyone is going online and in fact, Zoom calls have become fashionable now, that all people who didn't meet for last 20 years now want to meet up on a Zoom call. You would have had your school friends meeting. I had my school friends meeting. I had my college friends meeting. Duo, Zoom, you name it, and everyone is trying to reach out to each other and say, well, let's have a lockdown kind of a group meeting. So we are creating a lot of data and lot of content, which needs to be then secured and saved and replayed at a time when you can learn from it. And I think that's a great opportunity in itself in this period.
Absolutely. And just to those whole school and college friends video calls, it then goes on to social media, and you can then start connecting dots of who knows who and how do they know each other and how long, and that kind of whole creates the social media aspect of data, right?
So,
That's what we all are doing.
so 3 weeks ago, I met up with my schoolmates after 29 years. And we said, okay, let's do a 30-year reunion. But I didn't see, even if I was on Facebook with them, someone were there, someone were not there, someone were posting pictures, someone were not. We hadn't seen them. So it's like for the first time talking to someone in an environment where, it's like you were in school. So yeah, things have really changed in that manner.
Right, absolutely. Uh, uh, Thank you so much for sharing that story, Shailendra. Now this whole amount of data, right, just brings me to a security aspect, and my next question is related. That how do you think cyber security solutions? I saw one of the logs recently where Zoom bombing happened, right? So and things like that happened. So what in your opinion is the role that technology would play in developing cybersecurity solutions to meet, one is some of these aspects that we just talked about, and second is on the customer gaps or shortfalls from a customer using a platform having a heavy data intake perspective?
So, firstly, I must say that I'm not a cyber expert. So I'm not a cyber security expert, so I can't comment anything that is, technical. What I can definitely say is, with all the technology that is coming in at the moment, um, cybersecurity is the key to it, because more and more data that will be created, more and more vulnerability will be created. And to be honest, the reality is that as much technology will be used, you will find more and more hackers too. Yeah, it's tempting. So the technology has to be secured, and of course those guys will be hacking as well. So you need to make sure cybersecurity companies need to make sure that they're ahead of time. They move forward than the hackers, and make sure that it doesn't happen. This is all I can say, because I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I can't. But yes, there is an expectation that companies need to be secured. Technology needs to be secure.
Right. So from a data perspective, from the point that vast amount of data that I as a customer is am giving to technology companies, um, how can AI or machine learning help the customer be sure that he is safe, his data is safe, it's secure, and the data that's captured are, I know GDPR is something that Europe and European countries have conformed to. So how about a normal customer? How does he be sure that the data that he's giving to a company which is just wanting to do it for consume it for AI and ML related activities, be sure of uh, not being violated in any sense?
I have a very different opinion on that, and I know where you're getting to. Um, I have been doing analytics or advanced analytics for the past 26 years, right? And to be honest, I usually say privacy is a myth. It doesn't exist. And why it doesn't exist? Because 10 years ago, my job was exactly this: to understand what people are doing when they come to shop. Why do they shop? What will be their next shopping? There is no privacy there, right?
Right.
I was trying to understand everything. I knew everything about people. The reality is that how do you use that information? Because, for example, retailers would use that information to better the experience, to make sure that you get what you want. They know what you want is what you get, right? And so that data is used. The other way they'll be using is communicate with you to reach out to you to tell you that there is a new offer in the play or something like that. Having said that, as long as that is used in the essence where it is done for the betterment of the customer, it's all good. When it is misused is where there is a problem. And so that comes the fact that people need to be ethical and they should not be using the data for any misuse purposes. Communicating with the customer should be lying with the customer whether the customer wants to be communicated or not. So that is another thing that needs to be taken care of. And finally, when I say privacy is a myth, I say that because the moment you leave your home without a burqa or a cap, your privacy is breached, because there's a CCTV right up there which has taken your picture, and with your face I can identify you who you are, I can name you who you are, and as long as the CCTV footage keeps on catching you with one CCTV to the other CCTV to the other CCTV, I would know where you're doing, what you're doing, who you're meeting, where you're going. Unless you're not doing anything wrong, I don't think there is a problem. And I don't have a problem as well, because I'm outside on the road, and I go to malls and I know I'm being shot all over. So the privacy aspect doesn't exist. It is the ethical behavior of the organizations to make sure that they use that data to for the betterment or the for the betterment of the interaction with the customer. If that's not there and if they're misusing it, then there's a problem. But that's everything to do with ethical behavior, nothing to do with data. Right? Data is there. Data will always be there. It will be used, and it has to be used for a relationship. I'll tell you one thing. We used to say, because we collect all that data and all that information from the customer, there is an expectation from the customer that we know them. Now, I'll tell you a very old example. When I was a kid, I used to go to I'm hoping you'll have an Indian audience, a kirana shop or a grocery shop, right?
Right.
He knew me by the first name. He knew me what I wanted to drink. He knew me what chocolate I wanted, and I would get it. I would just go in and he will say, "This is your chocolate, your drink." I was getting all of that, right? So that was the personalized experience I was getting. Now, cut to, so he had all that information in his brain, right? So he knew that. Cut to, when you look at uh, a large organization with 2,000 stores and 200,000 items, no one can remember that. With 100,000 customers walking in every day, no one can remember each one of you. But I still want that personalized experience. For that, I will have to use the data to make sure that I tell you what you want at what time and you offered the right offer. And that is important, but that is right behavior. So if I said that my privacy was breached when I was a kid, yes, it was, because the guy remembered what I wanted to drink and what I wanted to eat. And that is the reality of it.
Thank you so much, Sharif. That was a very good example that you gave, and privacy is in myths is. Uh, I relate to what you're saying. I completely understand. Thank you so much. Are there any other thoughts that you'd want to leave our users with? Any closing thoughts?
See, my personal view is that there is a lot of data in the world, and we're creating more and more data almost every day, every second, every minute. And we also have a lot of information that is being created. With machine learning and analytics, we can use that to our advantage and help ourselves to create a good understanding and a good logic behind how to interact with the customers, how to make their lives better. And I think that should be done properly, and that should be done with right intent in mind by the organizations, without thinking that this is going to be the data is being taken away by someone and breached, and some privacy breach is done. This is the time, and we are at a very exciting time where we are at the cusp of utilizing that technology and those processes to deliver some outcome. And that could be in the case of COVID. It is even better, because I think today there are lots of AI related activities that has been done that that helps to solve a lot of those problems. For example, one of the articles which I've written yesterday, we found out that in China, they were able to send robots instead of doctors to the patients, to the COVID-19 patients, so that the doctors don't get infected, to do the normal one-on-one stuff. When it became larger stuff where you needed a doctor, but basically, on the other side, they could predict by the body temperature whether the person is likely to have a wet lung. Now, all of that is helping COVID-19 solution, as we can understand. And so when people say that some countries are able to fight the pandemic and some countries are not, that is also defining what is running under the covers, right? And that shows that US, UK, France, Italy didn't think of those things and utilize analytics or machine learning or AI, what you call it, to their advantage to fight COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Shailendra. I can't thank you enough for giving us your time for these very insightful discussion. I personally have learned a lot. Your insights will really help a lot of our viewers as well. Thank you so much for taking your time out for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've also published a new ebook on evolution of customer experience. We will be back soon with more such interesting videos and a new episode. So stay tuned. Thank you.